So Lloyd Alter is a writer, designer, editor of treehugger.com. He has graduated from the University of Toronto School of Architecture, now Daniels, and practices as an architect, real estate developer, and prefab housing entrepreneur. He has contributed to The Guardian, Azure, Huffington Post, and Corporate Knights magazines, and is Adjunct Professor teaching Sustainable Design at Ryerson University School of Interior Design. Lloyd is a past president of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, and it's talking about the buildings and city centre. So, welcome, Lloyd.
Thank you very much. Thanks for accommodating me. Transportation, urban transportation, and urban design are really two sides of the same story. So I thought it would be good to follow up and as I covered some of the points.
There's your clicker.
There's my clicker and the PDF. Before. There we are. Okay, I was asked in the letter that asked me to speak here to look at some of the solutions that have been proposed in the drawdown and talk about their relevance to Toronto. And I looked at them, and these were drafted up a few years ago. And every year I look at these because I was at the last drawdown things, and I thought, really, smart thermostats, heat pumps, green roofs, these are all nibbling around the edges. Landfill methane. This is not a list that works anymore. We've got 11 years to prevent irreversible damage, as we all know, and we have thousands and thousands of people turning out in the streets yesterday to protest that we've got a serious issue, and that maybe it's time that we should panic. Even the drawdown people, just 10 days ago, issued 2 new documents that actually talk about the greater scope of it and change it and get away from so many of the little details. So I'm going to instead talk about what are the much more important, critical details when your house is on fire, which are ours. The City of Toronto, for example, is this week Mayor Sporby is bringing forward a motion to declare a climate emergency. And I jokingly tweeted he's also at the same time going to announce that he's stopping the Gardner rebuild, cancelling the Scarborough subway, and reintroducing surface transit, a minimum grid for cyclists, and the end of single-family zoning. Because that's the scale of the kinds of things that you would do if you actually believed we had a climate emergency. And we have to look at how our city works. Now, just last week, a document came out of Britain that finally raised an issue that I'm going to talk about a lot, which is embodied carbon. Embodied carbon, I don't like the name because nobody knows what it means. I call it upfront carbon. And upfront carbon is the carbon that is emitted when you make something. When you build a building, when you make a car, when you build a road, it's the carbon from the manufacture of all the materials that go into it. To give you an example, I left my book over there, I'll have to get that at the right time. So what we really have to do to look at building now is not think about smart glass and not think about smart thermostats, it's think about, do we want to build a building at all? Should we be building a building at all? Well, thank you. We have to think about building less. What do we actually need? We have to build it clever, we have to optimize material usage, and most importantly, design with low carbon materials, and we have to build efficiently. And that means changing the materials for which we build. You'll see a lot more building out of wood because the making of concrete produces 6% of the carbon dioxide in the air. The making of steel uses about 6%, puts about 6% of the carbon dioxide in the air. Everyone will tell you aluminum is wonderful because it's all recycled, and it is, but there isn't enough of it, so there's massive production of primary aluminum, which uses vast amounts of electricity and actually produces carbon dioxide in the process. And we have to think about all of these. All we've ever talked about in buildings was, oh, let's insulate them and reduce operational carbon. But there's the upfront carbon that's caused in the construction process, the embodied in the materials, the embodied of actually fixing things and maintaining things, and the end-of-life carbon. So if you think about what a city and a world looks like when you worry about embodied carbon, you don't build stupid buildings that we don't actually need, like this tulip that was proposed for London last year. You don't bury subways in concrete tubes when you could actually have surface like these, which they're building in Toronto right now for subways, when you can have surface transportation that uses far less concrete, because concrete is embodied carbon. You don't take down perfectly good buildings, like this one in New York, the largest demolition project that's been done voluntarily. The World Trade Center going down is obviously bigger. But this building was just totally renovated to LEED Platinum standards 6 years ago. So it's essentially a 6-year-old building, not a 60-year-old building. You don't use plastic foams in insulation because plastic foams are basically solid petrochemicals that blowing agents and everything in them put out a huge amount of carbon. And one study that was just recently done showed that a house insulated to high performance with foam over its lifetime puts out more carbon dioxide than the carbon that comes out of a regular building because of all the embodied carbon in that orange. You would use materials like wood instead of concrete and steel. You use natural materials. You use cork, you use straw, you use all of these kinds of things. The greenest building in the world that I know of right now is this Enterprise Centre, a school in the UK that's actually made of thatch, it's made of cork, it's made of all natural materials. You can almost have this building for breakfast, like with their edible materials here that they've got, you know, straw, everything in it. And this is the world's largest building right now made of cross-laminated timber in London, which is basically plywood on steroids, it's nicknamed, but it's basically building a building out of solid wood. And this is the largest new wood building in Minneapolis, where the wood's all nailed together the way we've done for hundreds of years in warehouses, the way they're doing in Toronto right now on Atlantic Avenue, where this building is just coming to completion, the first big new wood building in Toronto. And more buildings are like this. George Brown College is building this building right now on the waterfront, the very nice tall wood building. University of Toronto is building this one. Speculative office building on Wade Avenue is being built out of wood. This is happening all over the world. And of course there's Sidewalk, which is supposed to, if it's built down on the waterfront, be built entirely of wood construction. This is totally unrealistic. It'll never look like this, but they are talking the right talk here with wood. And even with regular wood, they're making it much better. They can build wood frame now using computerized tools to get incredible accuracy. It uses far less wood than the solid wood, and this is actually being done by Great Gulf right now near the airport. They're bringing in these Swedish computerized tools that build wood panels, and in Sweden almost all of the housing is built this way. Low-rise, high-quality, factory-built panels that are assembled on site to build really first-class housing. The other thing that we have to do, when you saw in one of the drawdown, it said, well, insulation. Well, it's a matter of how much insulation. What we really have to do is start building to what in Europe is called the Passive House Standard. And it actually had its origin in Canada in 1974 in the Saskatchewan Conservation House here, where you can see it's a house with not too big a set of windows and a lot of insulation. Here's the German version of the same thing, the Passive House. And in Vancouver, where they actually give you an economic bonus to build Passive House Standard, almost every new apartment building is being built like this. This was the first Passive House apartment. This is the, I'm sorry? Only 1 more minute? Really? I'll have to get really fast then. We have to get rid of carbon. I have to get into transportation here. This is, we've got to build more simply, not with these incredibly ridiculous complex forms like we're getting in Toronto. We have to build simple forms like they do in Montreal. We have to decide what is enough, sufficiency, yet say yes to less. But this is what I wanted to get in. Just give me 1 minute for the cars. That there's all this talk about electric cars will save us. Trouble is, you have to go back to that embodied carbon. What is involved in making an electric car? 27 tons of carbon, roughly, to make a Tesla Model 3. If you multiply that out by the number of cars in Canada, the 24 million cars in Canada, that's 648 million tons of carbon to make all these electric cars. And they still need all those highways, and they still need have all that congestion. And compared to your other drawing before, they take up all as much space. Electric cars, autonomous cars, it's all the same on our highways. So what we have to do is think about changing the technology. The way it worked before, this is in Stockholm, transportation by streetcar, by bicycle, by walking. I saw this in Copenhagen myself, everybody riding that way. And the next revolution, I only have 3 or 4 more slides, is the e-bikes and e-scooter revolution. The ITDP, you showed their last study. This is their most recent work of how to integrate them. I came down here on my beautiful Dutch Gazelle e-bike, which I now ride everywhere. But when I was recently in France, I spent a lot of time riding these scooters, and everybody there did, and of all ages, and they're really practical, and they really are a revolution. Yeah. Yes, I agree. And these were just introduced a few weeks ago, which are another kind of scooter with interchangeable batteries. In Toronto, we're so far behind on this. If you cycle, you can barely cycle anywhere without somebody, often a cop, usually a FedEx truck in the lane. We have to think about the way we do things, change our attitudes to this, make it possible to change the way we get around. This is what I saw in Vienna that I loved. People on bikes, wooden buildings, 6-story, mid-rise, middle density. And so decarbonize, reduce demand, electrify everything, do more with less, and keep it simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. A huge amount of information in just over 8 minutes. Amazing. Thank you. Yeah. Well, a little bit over. Okay, I just want to reflect on the Buildings and Materials Summit. Just one item that stood out in my mind was the manufacture of bricks from carbon dioxide and calcium. Pulling carbon dioxide out and merge it with calcium and you get bricks. Sounds making limestone out of air. Amazing.